Hello and welcome. I'm very happy to be here today on this special occasion here to celebrate together with you the graduation, your graduation as well. And the theme of the whole graduation is transformation. And I want to take the opportunity to share a couple of thoughts, strategies and tools on the art of transformational leadership together with you. And I make myself a little bit smaller so I can share also a couple of visual slides together with you. So the art of transformational leadership, it's pretty simple, right? You will see it when you go out to your organizations, companies, teams, wherever you work on and you want to organize and you want to go out and say, let's transform the organization, right? And then across the world, we see a certain phenomenon. People say, oh, transformation is relatively straightforward. All it takes is a little beautiful picture. And then we see it all over the world. People share the story from the caterpillar to the butterfly. And people say, if nothing ever transformed, there would be no butterflies. It's beautifully done in Comic Sans Serif, as we can see here. And that's all it takes, right? Oh, no, on top, we need to do a couple of other things. We need to have beanbags. Well, we can all work together again. It's like these cool beanbags like this. We need to have post-its for transformation. And of course, not to be missed in every modern organization of the world, we need to have some table foosball. And then it is it. That's all you need, right? That's all it takes. Well, maybe not. Maybe there's a little bit more that it takes in order to transform an organization. Because if you do all that, if you really want to go out and say, let's really transform the way we work, the way we operate, the way we deal here, maybe you need to do something different. Because you will encounter more reactions that look a little bit like this. People are like, oh no, a transformation again? What is happening here? People not really being interested in whatever you want to share. Or you might do something different. You might have other kind of reactions, other kind of pushbacks. What you need to do is something different. What you need to do is probably also best summarized in the words of Peter Drucker. It's one of my favorite management thinkers, and he once shared one thing. You know what? Only 3 things happen naturally in organizations, really. And these 3 things are friction, confusion, and underperformance. For this, you don't have to do anything. But everything else requires leadership. And I would say for transformation specifically, it requires a certain kind of leadership. Transformational leadership. Now, whenever we talk about leadership, very often, especially in this day and age on social media and other places, you have this hero model, how I call it, of leadership. This fantastic model, like, okay, what is leadership? Wow, the leader is that perfect being who pushes things forward, owns everything, can do everything, and does everything. But I don't think that this is the best and the right model of leadership. Well, now, today I want to share with you a couple of real practical thoughts and tools for transformational leadership. So, what are those? They are not about these things. They're not about empowering, productivity, authenticity, flexibility, empowerment, coaching. All of these things are very important. They will continue to be important. And if you go out and after your graduation and drive transformation, all of these things are important. But I think for me, having studied a lot of transformations, large and small, from startup companies, but especially the big transformations that happened in larger organizations, I think for me personally, 3 things stood out. 3 things stood out. And I want to share with you these 3 tools or these 3 areas as well that I think great transformational leaders have. Number 1, have a bold vision. Have a bold vision. Transformational leaders have a bold vision for the future, and they share that vision. John Maxwell once said, a leader is someone who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. A leader is someone who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. Now, In this day and age, at the moment, with a high level of uncertainty, I would say knowing the way is maybe stretching it a little bit, but going the way and showing the way, that is one of the key things that everybody has to do. Now, the way sometimes can look a little bit like this. It's maybe not clear to everybody what the way looked like, and it can be very, very confusing. And then I see leaders fall into two kinds of traps. Trap number one, I have a nightmare, everything is going down the drain, I don't know what's happening here. That is certainly not how you can drive a transformation forward, a real transformative process. What is the key thing here? Paint a positive vision of the future, even if it's difficult, even if it's hard, even if the area where you work in is maybe a bit tough. Somebody once said, seeing the positive in a negative situation, that is naive, that is leadership. That is the essence, that is the core of leadership. But then there's another trap, and I see that a lot in large organizations as well. That trap is, I have a plan, and I have all the slides to share with you and all the details with that plan. And then very often the reaction goes, whoa, that's not how we drive transformation, really. What can you do instead? And I think what really, when you go out, one of the key skills to develop and to continuously develop as well is the art of storytelling. If you really want to transform, focus on two steps. If you go out into an organization, after your graduation now and so on, maybe you go back to an old job that you have, maybe you start something new, maybe you join a different organization, whatever it is, where you lead and where you put your skills into practice. You come and enter into a new organization, and the number one thing, identify the story that organization tells itself, the people and the organization itself that tell themselves. Oh, that's the way we do it over here. Yeah, that way we organize this and this process. We do that because this and this and this. Try to listen, because you're fresh. You're coming in after your graduation in this. Try to identify that. Try to identify the story that organization tells itself. And then if you want to drive something forward, if you really want to drive it forward, then tell a new story. Try to identify what can be a different story. What can be a different area. Try to identify, and the fundamental art of storytelling is to see what is the conflict, what is the problem, and introduce a new hero, so to speak, into your process. So maybe you see and you identify like, but I've seen that intern do this and this over there, or I've seen that other organization do it differently. Maybe share and tell that new story as well towards, first for yourself, and then drive that. And especially if you're being charged with transforming an organization, try to identify the potential thing that the organization tells itself, and then tell it in a new way. That is step by step the way we create a new story. Great transformational leaders are storytellers, are fantastic storytellers. And the way we identify a story is really trying to see what is the organization, what did it tell itself before, and what might be a new thing that we can tell ourselves. And then, especially if you're being charged with really creating transformation, then go out and really repeat that. Great transformation leaders are great storytellers. Repeat that new story until your story and your new story of your project, organization, whatever it is, passes what I call the story Turing test. You might have heard all of the Turing tests, basically, that is used for AI and in the field of computer, basically. Like, can we see it? Can we separate? Can we distinguish, so to speak, an algorithm from a human? Now, what I very often do is what I would call the story Turing test. If truly transformation happens, if in one part of the organization, or maybe the full organization itself, that new story, that new direction is being shared and told by everybody, and it's almost, of course with some distinctions, it's almost indistinguishable from each other. That's when you realize that the organization is in the new direction. And it starts all with a transformational leader who identifies that new story and then who shares with passion and with great conviction that new story that sets itself up in that new direction. So try to focus on that. Build, when you go out now, build the art of storytelling. Try to really hone this. And this is really a never-ending art that you can keep on working on it. Because it will be so easy always to dive into that how. Like whenever you go into transformation, like people build that PowerPoint decks of 50 slides, how will we change and how will we do that? And this is important. But even more important is that what and why. Why do we do this? And what is really that new direction? Focus on that. Try to continuously, whenever you become and need to work on your transformation project, focus on that, the what and the why. Then we come to the next tool or strategy that great transformation leaders, I think, use and have. Number 2, experiment. Whenever you go out and maybe join new companies, new organizations, new projects, NGOs, whatever it is that you're working on, try to look at the world, what I recommend sometimes from this way you work in. Do you have a static environment or a dynamic environment? Do you have a long operating history or a short operating history? Long, short, dynamic or static. In a static environment, not a lot is changing, and long operating history, well, we've always done it this and this way. Well, what you can do in this area is predict and plan. You can really say, okay, we do it like this and this and this and this. Now, this year, 2020, has shown us that not a lot of these environments still exist. Basically, the whole world has been a bit in a shake-up situation as well. And of course, not only because of the digital transformation that will happen in the future as well, but who knows what the future might bring. Very often, wherever you go into, you might be faced as well with a dynamic environment with very short operating history. The question is, what do we do here? How do we operate here? And here probably the words of Joseph Campbell ring true. If the path before you is clear, you're probably on somebody else's path. If the path before you is clear, you're probably on somebody else's path. Now, what do we do here? How can we operate? With what I call the spaghetti principle. What is the spaghetti principle? Well, if you've ever cooked spaghetti or watched while others cooked spaghetti, you will notice that there are a couple of different ways on how we can tell that spaghetti are ready to eat. Whenever I ask this across the globe, you get different questions. Like, whenever you think like, okay, how do you know that spaghetti are ready to eat? Well, one thing could be, well, I taste them. And if they taste ready, they're good. Okay, great. Other people say, I time them. It says on the package, it says 12 minutes. And after 12 minutes, I throw them out and they're ready. Okay. Some people sometimes answer, I just look at them and I know they're ready. And then there's a fourth method that sometimes you see across the world being practiced. You can also throw them to the wall and see if they stick. And if they stick, they're ready to eat, or maybe even a bit over ready. But let's not go into these distinctions here. This is, by the way, what that looks like. You throw them to the wall, and if they stick, well, they may be ready or a bit over ready to eat. And if they fall off, well, then they are not yet. And I use that as a metaphor, of course, for operating in this uncertain environment. What every great transformation leader has to do is to experiment. Throw things to the wall and see if they stick. And if they stick, well, continue doing them. If they fall off, well, you step on. That is really in this new, highly different, highly difficult environments, something that every transformational leader should be doing and should have in his or her toolbox. So in this field here, what we need to do is test and iterate, or how I call it, spaghetti it. Throw it to the wall and see if it sticks. And do that in all different kinds of fields. Whenever you, of course, set your big, bold vision forward, like the way then you operate, especially if it's uncertain, especially if it's unclear, you throw lots of things at the wall and see if they stick, to really see, can I reach my vision here as well? So when I was researching this for my latest book, Innovation That Sticks, basically where we dive into these fields, one company, for example, said, we transform, we don't know really what the direction is. And that company, Deme, which is a marine dredging company, basically. So they're one of the world leaders in that field. Where they said, how we want to transform and want to continuously navigate and come up with new things to really transform ourselves is that everybody gets a time window to say, whatever idea you have, you can throw to the wall and see if it sticks. You get a time box, so to speak, of 8 months for it. And during that 8 months, you have to try and test it if it works. If it doesn't work, no harm done. If it does work, okay, great. We take it to the next step. And that is some of the things that is the combination with a great bold vision that you set. But then how we do this? Well, this is testing out, experimenting and so on. And that's what I've seen the great leaders do. Now, some of you might say like, okay, I'm graduating. I'm not really changing a full company or a full organization or a full university or whatever it is that you work on later on before. But all of you have something that is in your circle of control, that is in your circle of influence. And that's where I very often recommend to start. So for example, what a lot of you will be in charge of and will probably be leading is your meetings. A meeting that you lead, be that a project update meeting or whatever. And I think meetings are really underrated because meetings are very often, the meetings that you set up are in your control. They are your circle of influence and you can use them, as I call that, as a transformation playground. It's a transformation playground. If you don't know where to start with your meeting and start to test out a couple of things, start to change the way we do things and so on, because this is what you can do and you can slowly start and go further around this. And that brings me to the third box now. We've set the bold vision. We've set experiment. Number 3 is think inside the box. Transform by thinking inside the box. Inside the box, you might say? Shouldn't we think outside the box? Yes, very often you hear, oh no, we have to solve this, but let's think out of the box here. And so on. But I'm not sure what these boxes, people think they find a lot outside of these boxes, but I think, especially for transformations, we can also find a lot of insights and inspiration inside that box. So I think great transformation leaders create a couple of boxes and then drive the transformation forward. Let me give you some examples for that. My favorite box is what I would call the space box or the limitation box. We limit the space or we limit the amount of resources available and then see what happens. And very often, great transformation and great change happens. So for instance, if I were to ask you now, we talked about the bold vision. If I were to tell you like, write down your vision right now. Some of you might say like, whoa, what do you mean? What do you mean writing down the vision? It's very, very difficult. Yeah? So some people are like, well, I don't know what to do. It looks like it's chaos in my mind, and I don't know what you mean. And so on. That's very often the reaction that I have when I tell people, okay, think about your bold vision, write it down right now. But think about it differently. If I were to tell you now something different, and we can take some inspirations actually from, if we take this writing session, write down from some of the challenges that we've seen. So for example, what we see all over the world are 50-word poems. So instead of where people say like write a poem, people would like, whoa, different. No, write a poem with 50 words exactly. And all of a sudden, 50 words exactly. Okay, then I can go forward. Or haiku, some of you might know the famous Japanese structure with 16 syllables and so on is a very powerful thing as well. One of the most interesting ones that you can research for yourself is what is called the 6-word story, originally inspired by Ernest Hemingway, and then has become like lots of challenges over the internet. Tell a story in 6 words or less. And if you go and research, you find some great examples. Some of the favorite examples that I found was like something like this: I'm getting better at being worse. Wow. Tough one in 6 words. Or let it go and see what stays. Or my absolute favorite, torched the haystack and found the needle. Very powerful, in short 6 words, telling a story. Now, let's go back to our vision. If I were to tell you, write down your vision, you would like, I don't know. But maybe if I were to tell you, write down your vision in this box here in 6 words, all of a sudden, it becomes probably more feasible for you. Like, okay, now I have 6 words to play with, so let me think. And then we can start going on. And who knows, maybe your vision will be the same as Steve Jobs' very famous vision for the first iPods. Where he said, like, okay, the iPod is 1,000 songs in your pocket, which is also 6 words. And maybe your vision can also be something that really shares something as powerful with the world. Now, why is that so important? Is it 6 words important? No, it's not the 6 words and so on. It's the box that counts, that makes it feasible that you can actually take something forward. Jim Rohn once said, there are only 3 colors, 10 digits, and 7 notes. It's what you do with them that's important. So the limitation is not the change. It's actually setting the limitation can help us go deep, find a structure as well. One of my favorite examples here is the company or startup called Skybox, aptly called. And they set themselves out for a challenge. So can we build a satellite with only commercially available parts? And they did it, and actually lowered the cost quite significantly versus the other ones, more tailored satellites with it. This is also an example for what I would call a space box or resource box. You set a limit, and then all of a sudden you can actually take this to action much, much stronger. A box can also be a framework, a structure, a process. Anything where you say okay, no, we don't have free-floating discussion right now. We set up a certain process, we set up a box, and then we allow ourselves to go deep in this one. As Brendon Burchard once said, to rise higher, go deeper. And how to do that? By setting a framework, putting restrictions on it, because then we can really go deep within this. And that is really very often how you can move ahead forward. So what do great leaders do? Great leaders create boxes. Put like this stick over there, put a stick in the sand, and then defend it. Because then if people can agree on that stick in the ground, on that box, then they can actually go deeper in this and really go one step further. So these are the 3 areas here that I've seen really, for me personally, truly amazing transformational leaders do. Have a bold vision for the future, but also change the story that the organization tells itself as part of that vision. Then experiment for the right thing, experiment until you test out and find how we best get to that vision. But then also create these boxes and defend these boxes. Because we don't have to always, of course with experimenting we go outside, but also then if we want to implement it, great leaders, great transformational leaders really create these boxes and let people within these limitations really go deep. And that actually creates transformation. But it all is connected to one field. And when you go out now to the world after your graduation, use all the skills and everything that you've learned now and put it into practice. I want to give you one challenge to really think about when you want to become and further drive your transformational leadership skills. And that is to think about your self-leadership. Because one of the most difficult person to lead is yourself. Of course, leading others is tough, but leading yourself is probably one of the toughest things. Great leadership, great transformational leadership starts with self-leadership, starts with leading yourself. And that's why I would recommend you to really constantly reflect about your leadership. Think about and maybe even start carrying a little leadership journal and so on and really do your challenges. But also every day or at least once a week, once per month on the minimum, ask yourself, okay, for my leadership journey, how's it going? How is the leadership? How would I rate myself? But also ask yourself some questions. And especially if you're being tasked with a challenge and as future leaders, you will have come across challenges. Think about questions like this. How would the leader I would like to be do the thing I'm about to do? Have constantly that reflection process in it to also lead yourself in that transformation. And if you do that, I'm sure you will transform your project, your organizations, and so on while you go out. So again, congratulations to your graduation, and I wish you all the best with the upcoming leadership challenges, upcoming transformations, and so on that you might lead. Congratulations and happy leading of transformations in the future.